Mm-hmm.
It looked like a can opener had gone on it where they were hooking it to pull it out.
Oh, wow.
His went down.
In, wow. Yeah, and those
My
those
cousin
frozen
and
lakes, they
buddy
get.
and I, we all had four-wheel drive trucks, and we were out in this place up by, the other side of Flint, Hogbacks they called it. We came to a lake and there was no backing out. So we all walked the ice, looked at it. There was a hill on the other side, so you had to be getting it when you got across here to make the hill.
Mm-hmm.
So the first guy went across, he made it. My cousin went across, he made it. And I thought, well, I don't know if being the last one's good or bad, but here I go. And I got all the way across. Man, you could hear the ice.
The Kraken? Yeah, that's just nuts. That's nuts.
popping.
Because it shifts. It's always moving. It never stays
But
still.
you ever been to the Perch Festival up in northern Michigan?
No.
Oh, yeah, they take campers and motorhomes and everything
Oh, yeah.
out on the ice up there.
In Minnesota, like the biggest lake in Minnesota, in the center, they do like they basically do like I call it an ice village, and they go and they do fishing. It's like guys have like whole houses, they slide out there, and they do ice fishing the whole time.
I seen a picture when I was stationed in the Sioux, a guy had it from up there. It was an old, I don't know, Model T truck.
Yep.
But they had saw blades on the rear wheels
Yep.
and skis on the front. And they'd haul logs across
Yep.
the ice.
Yep.
And the saw
They
blades,
give 'em grip.
that's how they got across.
Wow,
And the
it's
ski
amazing.
blades.
It's amazing.
Crazy people.
All right, let's talk about grief and loss, ministry, grief and loss. So we're going to talk about some big concepts here, and how to do some things we talk about, and how we'll talk about some general like concepts, and then application of how lay ministers will work with those in grief and loss. So let's talk about the dynamics of grief, and I say they're dynamics. I'll explain to you a little bit here. There's a first step of shock, like could this happen? And this can happen at different parts. For example, when you have a family in a long-term health crisis, and maybe you guys have stories about this, I'm sure, where let's say they're in hospice care, and that's known, okay? That's when the shock hits then. When the first diagnosis happens that, okay, the end is near, or they're gone. Sometimes if it's not unknown, something happens, car wrecks, heart attack, whatever, sudden, then the shock happens. That's the first part of it. Then there's a catharsis, which is a release of emotions, a lot of crying, and you bounce between those. These are not steps; they're part of grief. Okay. Depression will also come with it. There'll be a down feeling. A lot of times, people will feel real lethargic for several days, weeks, months. Depends on. We'll talk about the difference of how people approach grief different ways. People can feel grief over a pet, family pet, loved ones, cousins, friends, spouses, parents. Depends on the stage of life that they're in and how they're affected. And it's never a clear-cut thing. It's a process that I always walk through. Depression will come up, and then the closer they are to the person, depression is probably the biggest thing that kind of throws them off, because they'll feel waves of it at different points. And it'll hit them at waves, and like they'll be having a normal day, and all of a sudden they feel that heaviness upon them. It's part of the grief process. It's just what it is. There's no way around it. It's just what it is. Another part.
For years.
Hmm?
Does that happen for years?
It can happen for years. It can happen.
Because
For years.
my mom, I think she gets that. And Dad's been gone, 5 or 6
Oh.
years now.
Spouses, you feel that probably the most significant.
She actually told me the other day that she asked God to go put him up on his lap and put his arm around her and tell him she was sorry for how she, some of the things she'd done.
And that's guilt.
Yeah.
There's remorse about what you did or didn't do, or you weren't there for them, and there's a lot of things that we always feel that we should do more, or we could have done more, even though if you know that's all you could have done. It's a feeling. There's a thought and a feeling. They don't always match up.
Right.
Logic says you did all you could. The feeling is I could have done more.
They gave us morphine to help him in the end.
Yeah, that's a very common
Yeah.
practice.
Mom wouldn't give it to him because she says, I don't want people to think I killed him. So she said, Michelle, will you give it to him? Michelle's like, oh, so you want to think I killed him?
Right. And that's a real thing, and and they'll have questions about that. Should we have done this? Should we have done that? What ifs are the worst for these types of situations. The what ifs are the worst, because should we have done that? Should we have done this? And I've seen all extremes. I've seen people, do some of the worst case scenarios where they trying to extend the person's life. They'll do treatments, and most of the time it's a little bit of a different type of treatment. They'll go to a special hospital. I'm going to say which ones do this, but they'll do that, and it costs a lot of money, and it doesn't really change anything. It may have made their life more comfortable for a season, but really, ultimately did not change anything. and there's guilt about that, and then those that heard about that didn't do it, should they have done it? There's a lot to that. So, but there's always guilt involved. It's the emotion of it that you're dealing with. All these things, shock, the release of emotion, depression, it's all part of emotions. Logic does not play into it. So you can't deal with it in a logical way.
Is 8 years a long time after somebody dies for
Depends.
preoccupation of loss?
Depends on the person. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Because each person's different, each relationship's different. And how it affects us is different. There is no and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but there is no
Hard and fast.
there's no hard and fast rule. And there's some people. There was a book called The Stages of Grief, which this kind of comes off of. And a gentleman that I did a bunch of research on grief and loss in kids for a research project I did for my master's, and I used his book a lot. And he worked with the guy that wrote that book. And she basically the publisher said, you gotta give it a different title. Call it 5 Stages of Grief. And she didn't want to do it because it doesn't really fit. Stages says I'll get down with one and go on the other. That's not true. There's these components of grief that show up in different ways, in different forms, at different times. Nope, and they all hit you at one time, or one will be louder than one to the other. One will go away for a while. It's all a mixed bag, and it all depends upon the person and the relationship they had with that person, the loss. And there's no right or wrong to it. Typically, you feel less effect of it after about 2 years. The hardest effect to be within the first 2 years. But the residual effect, how much varies depending upon person and relationship and all that. It doesn't always go away. But
The smell
Yep.
during the day, or
Oh, yep.
a
Exactly.
song will come on the radio.
Yep. And it just randomly just hit them.
Yeah.
Dreams, nightmares will help them
Well, I
remember.
dream
And
about my dad and my uncle all the time.
Yep.
And they've
Yep.
been gone.
gone for years. People think they saw the loved one in a grocery store.
Yeah.
And they go, and they'll look, no, that's not them. But they'll see someone who looks like them a little bit, and that triggers. And I'll explain it to you in a little bit here. How that's a real psychological effect. Okay. Preoccupation with the loss, the loss of that loved one, the feeling they feel, the change in life, the closer they are to them, it's a big change. The worst thing you can do is bury a child.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Right. And that's that. And that, okay, this for example, when someone loses a child, especially a younger child, has more disruption upon the family than just about anything. It's more threat to the marriage than an affair.
Yeah.
I've had people lose a child and then the marriage not survive. I've had people who had affairs and the marriage can survive.
My boss lost a child,
Yep.
7 years old.
I
Yep.
think
And
that's,
he thinks that I'm in a cult. Because he's Catholic.
Right.
And he doesn't think that we should be praying the way we pray.
Yep.
And I sing religious songs when I'm on my high-low.
stop, put her hands up.
I talk to them about what I've learned in church, but I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna let him deter me
Yeah.
from.
Yeah. Because that's religion fits in that box and how does that work out? Plus,
He might
That's
be angry
Catholicism.
though
Yep.
too. You know,
It's-
he
there's a
he
lot of
may
things with
blame
that.
God,
Right.
you know,
His
that-
son was very young, got cancer.
yeah. And that's just brutal. It's just brutal. And so, and even when you get older, and you have kids, we're supposed to die before kids. We're not supposed to bury our kids. And that's always a heavy loss. There's that aspect of it. Then there's the effect of it's happened to me a couple times, more than a couple times, a few times. Go to the funeral home, talk to people, and then they realize this parent was the second parent they lost, and maybe the last adult of that generation. All the aunts and uncles are gone. That's the last one to go, and now we are the old people.
Yeah,
We are that
was
generation.
My mom, her brothers, her sisters, there's just her, and I've got one uncle left.
Yep. And because that shifts everything. The holidays change then because that hub of the patriarch and matriarch keep everything together. When they pass away, the family system changes.
Yeah, my uncle
That's
calls
awful.
my mom every day, sometimes 2 or 3, and now she says, I miss his call so much. But he had pancreatic cancer.
Right.
And they wanted to do surgery. He said, no. He says, I'm 80 years old, I'm not gonna go
Yep.
through that.
Yep.
And they said, well, you'll be gone in 6 months. He said, well, then I'll be gone.
Right. Well, my mother-in-law,
She
she's
lived 5 years.
Right.
With no pain.
Hmm.
And he looked like he said, if you saw me without my shirt on, I looked like a Holocaust victim.
Right.
And he died in his sleep.
My mother-in-law, she's in hospice care right now, and she was in October. She got sick, same time as Beth was in the hospital, and she developed her heart function dropped drastically, and they said this is not good for someone that's 87, and then she has dementia, and it's really accelerated since this all happened.
Oh, yeah.
And so, but she said, I don't want to be like, if it's my time to go, just, and Rosie and her had a conversation. They go, okay. So mom, you don't, so when they moved her, we put her in a nursing home. Okay, mom, we're gonna put you in a nursing home. What do you want to do? So they did the whole plan thing. Okay, do you want to be resuscitated? Nope. If you go to the hospital, if you go to nursing home, if someone happens, you want to be brought to the nursing home. She says, nope. Okay, I'll go see Jesus. Okay. And so, and then the one thing she didn't want is she didn't want to lose her mind like her sister did now, but we're seeing that happen to her now, which is hard.
My dad got dementia and Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And
And that
that's terrible to watch.
end of life, when your heart stops functioning, those things accelerate
Yeah.
because your body shuts down. Your organs, by sudden trauma or slow death, by process of death, your brain or your other organs start shutting down. And then how that happens, there's no rhyme or reason to it. It just happens.
My mom promised not to put him in a home.
Right.
He said, when I leave here, they're taking me out feet first. That's the way it is.
Yep.
But Michelle took care of him. She quit her job. And took care of him.
So let's move on here. So there's a preoccupation with the loss, and that feeling that comes up different ways. Anger, we can anger at God, anger at the doctors. I've seen that happen in different shapes and forms. What they treat, like I remember talking to someone recently, and they lost her spouse, and same age as me, and of cancer, and he was really angry at the doctors because they kept on saying, well, if we do this, if we do that, and the doctor, what most doctors want to say, I don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
They just didn't say, we got nothing else left. And they kept on saying, well, and he goes, no, they're lying to me. Just be honest. And they did treatment that was worthless. It did no good, made things worse. Because that was
Michelle's
stupid.
sister-in-law, that was her brother. She went in, but she wouldn't go to the doctor. She had COPD, and she went in on Monday night and was dead Tuesday morning, and nobody saw it coming.
Yeah, that's rough.
59.
Yeah,
Oh, he's wanting to sue everybody.
Yep. yeah. But
The cops even took us out of the hospital.
Yeah, because he
That's
went
how bad it was.
yeah, that's intense.
He scared everybody in that hospital.
Right. Yep, that's tough.
Well, they
That's
put
tough.
her on a ventilator, and he's anti-everything,
Mm-hmm.
He's one of them that went and broke into the Capitol and all that stuff.
Oh wow.
And,
He was very angry.
yeah, and so I come walking in. When I got there, Michelle called me a wreck, so I came in, and I'm walking in with the sheriffs. I didn't know what they were there for. Michelle goes, what did you do? I said, I didn't do nothing.
He just walked in.
They were there for us. For
Wow.
my brother.
So a lot of anger, and that comes out in different ways, shapes, and forms. And it just, again, these are all parts of those stages. Then they adapt. Then there's adapting to reality that the person's gone. And what does that mean for me? That can be emotional. It can be very much logistic,
Scary.
financially for like if it's spouse or children,
Her brother
or
didn't even know where they banked or how to write a check.
all those things are real important. And that comes into adapt. A lot of times they don't like what they call. Oftentimes someone will pass away, and I've just been doing so long. People call, okay, they're at the hospital, they're dead, and they go, we don't know what to do. Who do we call? Where do we go? Now, we know, you call the nurse, you call the funeral home, and there's 2 or 3 we recommend. Call these folks, they'll take care of it. But they don't even know to do that. They don't have, I'm thinking, you don't have a plan. Like, so I literally sat down with mom and dad, okay, what do you want? When you guys, because they're not even close to anything, I go, okay, what? Mom goes, cremate us. What? Cremate us. We don't want to be buried. I go, no plot. Don't spend no money, no plot. Just cremate us. I go, well, what do you want to do with the ashes? I don't care. That's your problem, not mine. I go, okay. So I told my brother they want to be cremated. He's like, okay. And so like,
Good to talk about it.
it's good to talk about it. And so and people like when it gets, oftentimes if I'll go to the hospital and say, okay, they said, okay, we're getting down the end. They'll look at me, what do I do? Where do I go? We never planned for this.
Yeah.
They have financially, they may have some insurance. Sometimes they don't. In the church, what we do here is what we do. Oftentimes cremation is way cheaper. Cremation, honestly, it's okay, nuts and bolts cost you $900 at cremation through Generations over on Van Dyke.
Yeah, I've seen
It's-
Where is it?
it's
What do you
generation-
recommend?
Generations for cremation, it's Generations on Van Dyke.
We've already talked to our kids about
And
what we want.
what funeral homes?
Funeral homes
do you
would be
recommend?
Wuchak Cafeteria.
Oh, yeah.
Those that's one of the first ones. Then the second one would be Sullivan's over on Hall Road. I personally like Sullivan's. My personally as a pastor, when I work with those guys, they're really great. But Wuchak Cafeteria are great too.
Who's doing that?
When on Utica and
In Fraser, like Utica.
That's like
Super nice guy, man.
I
Just
can't remember his
It's like a one-word title, I think.
Yeah.
Olem or Urim or something like that. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a White House there. Yep. I've been there.
You used to have the carriage out front now.
Yes. Yeah, we've done a couple funerals there
Yeah.
for some folks.
Super guy.
We don't do too many down there, but we do them down there every so often. But we do, a lot of folks tend to like the one over in Romeo Plank, and off of 21 there, which is a nice facility. We do a lot of work with them. But I found that Sullivan's, Rujak Kakatira, if there's some
That's one on
financial
Van
needs,
Dyke.
they're very flexible. I mean, we've had it, where a
Isn't
funeral
that
home.
one on Van Dyke and 26 Mile?
Yes,
That's-
and they're on
there's
6.
also one at
There's also one at
16.
16 in Shaner. They have two.
Sorry.
And you're fine.
Oh,
You're
that's
fine.
good.
And but Sullivan's is they're really good too. They're over here in Hall Road. They don't when we need like ask for donations and stuff. They're always working with us on a lot of different things. They provide the calendars we use here at the church.
They what?
They print calendars with their name and the church name on them
Oh, yeah.
every year, and as giveaways. But they're really good to work with. And yeah, most funeral homes are fine, but there's some I would like. I wouldn't go. If you have a choice, don't go there. So, but if sometimes like, stuff set up, it's like what it is. Okay, no big deal.
Well, now they do them boom, boom.
It's really fast. Most people don't have, and what it is, though, okay, so if someone says, okay, we have no money, how are we going to do a funeral? We will recommend, and they go, okay, should we do cremation? Cremation biblically is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? So, but cost-wise, cremation is way less expensive than a burial.
Yeah.
It's $900, and what happens, they give you a box, and you can buy urns and stuff like that. You can buy it online. You don't have to pay any special. You can buy it on Amazon,
If
urn.
they're a veteran, they can go to the VA. It's all
They can go to VA, that's what low cost there. But then what we do at the church though for a memorial service, because if you do a funeral at the funeral home, you're looking about $1,000 for. It's like about $2,000 by everything all said and done, and that's on the low end.
Which was your brother's?
12,000.
But 12,000, 20,000 is
They
average
went
cost.
on 4 or
With
5
burial and the whole visitation and funeral at the funeral home, it can run 10 to 20,000 like that. But what we offer here is that we'll do often is okay. You can do if you do cremation now, save some money there. Then you can do what we can do with cremation. You have flexibility of schedule. So then we'll do a memorial service here at the church,
Right.
and it's like you pay for the chapel. If you want to do a luncheon, you can. We'll give you recommend some caterers, and there's some fees if you're a member or not member or whatever. With the using of the chapel, we'll do a service for you, coordinate that, and that's really low cost. It saves people a lot of money that way, and we do that a lot.
That's good to know.
But so we do that because the funeral home route's expensive, and even like a lot of times it's really hard for Pastor and I when this comes up. But we will do for some folks like long-term members, like okay, we'll do the funeral at the church, and they say, well, no, it costs too much money to they'll charge extra fees to go from the funeral home to view into the funeral home and come here. They make it cost, and the family doesn't want to do it. It's like
I just say, put them in the back of my truck, I'll drive.
yeah, that too. So there's a lot of stuff with that, but so there's all that, and that's kind of nuts and bolts of all that stuff.
I'll turn it up, but I'm gonna turn it back down.
Yeah, fine. It resets itself after a few hours. So
It's set at 60.
yeah, it defaulted down.
No wonder.
So those are things that we do for funerals and how we try to accommodate for that when that comes up. Okay, so key concepts of grief. Let's kind of talk about grief more. We talk about those are dynamics. They're not steps. These are parts of grief that show up in different ways. The idea of closure is a lie. There is no such thing as closure when it comes to grief and loss. There's no such thing as closure. There are things that we do, and it's right. The reason that we really emphasize, and I've had a tough time a couple times, and I've called family up, because we will say, hey, if you want to do a memorial service here at the church, we will do it. We'll do it I'll do it for free. Just have some family come together. We'll do a simple service.
Yeah.
It's important to do those
For the
things.
family. People
For the
who are-
family and the friends, it's important to do those things.
It's the way them
That
say
doesn't
it.
give closure, but it's something that's kind of concrete. And it's kind of those things that you kind of walk through to help you get this what it is. If you do a burial service, family does burial service, they'll ask me all the time. And they ask me about kids all the time. I always say let the kids be a part as much as they want to be a part. Do not exclude them. Don't exclude anybody from any other part of the process. If it's a funeral home, that's why people like the one in Romeo Plank, they have a little playroom for kids right there. It's really nice. And so the kids can be present, they can be there, they go to room, in and out, cool, no big deal. When it comes to actual burial, do we stay, do we go? Now, Michigan weather will dictate sometimes when it's bitter cold, people won't stay, they'll leave. Some often will stay, and that's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Michelle's family never did funerals.
Yep.
She met me, now she's been to more funerals.
Yep.
My grandma and my grandpa both, they died, and they were taken away before we even got there.
Right.
And then they were cremated.
Right.
And then, so they always went
That
to
was
Florida for the winter. So every spring I was like, okay, Grandma and Grandpa are gonna come back home.
Right.
And they didn't come back.
Right.
Because there was no end game to it.
There's when you do a memorial, it says, okay, this for biblically the idea of our spiritual life is, okay, we do it because there's oftentimes we're recognizing this life and we're kind of releasing it. It's more for it's not for the person's purpose.
Right.
It's for we're releasing this person to whatever, to the eternity.
We had no memorial. We had
And
nothing.
that's why that's value. It's at those steps that we do because you can't forget. You don't forget. And to recognize the value is very important. And so how that looks and feels is very important. A lot of times people will get stuck because there's been no real good process for that to do so. We do a thing called grief shift. If we do it again, we haven't done it for a while, probably do it maybe next fall. Maybe I'll lead it. And it's a video series, teaching series, and it's really good grief stuff. And we encourage people to go to it. A lot of people don't go to it. I don't know why, but they just don't. But it's really great stuff.
I think nobody wants to admit.
They don't want to admit that they're dealing with grief.
Yeah.
That's the
I
thing.
have two questions.
Sure.
One, in cremation,
Yes.
do you find that it's better for the family to have the person laid out to view
If
and then have the
if it's better for the family for process, yes. But then there's the economics of it, and it depends on what they can and cannot do because that's like a $5,000 deal because so.
Rented a coffin. And
You rent the coffin, do that in the funeral home, and it's way cheaper than doing the 12,000, 20,000, but it's going to be still several thousand.
My other question is, on a funeral, are family members allowed to get up and say something?
Here at Lakeside,
Yeah.
we will do when we do a funeral here at the church. It's a church service, so family can, but we really kind of guard it because people can get really weird and say some things that aren't very good. They do want to said in church. So we tend not to do that too much. When I do funerals at a funeral home, whatever the family wants, very rarely do I have family members want to speak though. I may get two, usually it's like two, maybe three, usually one or none.
My kids wrote stuff down when my dad passed and then they read it.
I'm thinking of the kids because I've been to funerals where kids have gotten up and said, "Oh, my mother or grandma really meant a lot to me. She did that."
Right.
And
Right.
you don't allow that.
At a service here in church, we typically don't
In
do
the chapel.
and if you do a sanctuary one, if we do it now, a chapel service would be like a memorial. A service in the sanctuary, that would be a full. We consider church service. We'll have worship. We'll have all these. It's a more of a church service feel to it, and so we tend not to because it can get kind of a little weird. If we're doing just kind of a memorial service, yes, we'll do that in the memorial
Okay, now
service.
just help me out. Which one's the sanctuary?
The 10 o'clock service.
Okay.
That's the main sanctuary.
That's
Then
considered the sanctuary.
that would be considered sanctuary. And that's what we
Whereas
do.
the chapel is.
Chapels,
where
at Solid Rock Cafe, and all
Okay.
that stuff. Yeah.
And so if it was just a cremation.
That would almost always be in the chapel, and that would be a memorial service, and that would be more. And those are more relaxed. Those are tend to be more simple. I mean, I will tend to do like a half-hour message at most, and then give time for family to share memories. If we're doing we just did a full-fledged funeral for one of the police officers in Shelby Township, and that was a big event, and we had a big. Now the problem is though, is the one thing you don't realize is that we have to run a schedule.
You have what?
We have a schedule.
Oh,
And so if it's in a casket and they're going to graveside, we have to leave at a certain time. Otherwise, it messes up the schedule when we arrive graveside. And so that's most people don't realize that we have basically like an hour. The funeral director's kind of by default will plan an hour. And if I have someone get there to take 20 minutes, guess what? I'm in a whole lot of hurt schedule wise, and I can't rush it, and then it becomes a problem down the road. Especially if I have because what happens is all these things people don't realize. If you're leaving here and if you're doing a procession to the cemetery, that involves traffic, clearing traffic, and the route that they choose.
Especially out here.
And I had one funeral go long because a family wanted to have someone speak. I did it at the funeral home. I said no problem because I'm like whatever. I roll with whatever, especially in that setting. Whatever you want to do, we'll do. I don't care. But I knew my time schedule. So the family spoke a long time. And the funeral director looking at me from the back like, we got to go. Because he knew that if we went much later, we'd hit rush hour traffic trying to cross hall to get to the funeral home, to get to the cemetery. And so I had to abbreviate the message basically and be real short with it. To know I had to basically wrap things up in like 15 minutes. And so there's all these logistics of you can do that, but there's this whole thing. So if we do a full-fledged church service, 9 times out of 10 it's going to be procession to the funeral home, and we're on a schedule, and we got to be careful of that. That's the issue. That's
We
more
were
of
at
the
a
issue.
funeral just before Christmas, a good friend of ours passed away, and his son was there
Oh my.
with his wife and kids, and then he introduced this other woman, this is girlfriend.
Girlfriend.
And he
Yeah.
brought her in, and that's like family drama that
Yeah.
nobody expected.
Yeah, and that like we won't. If I do a service, that's some way. If someone's gonna speak, we'll let one or two. Like pastor will have like if we do one here, he'll like have one or two, and then if we're doing full fledged, like it's only one or two. Don't do more than that because they can go too long.
Don't open the mic up for anybody.
Don't open the mic. Now at his funeral home, if I'm not limited to time schedule, I'll open the mic or whatever. But we've had some people do some really harmful. We've had one guy. This is before I came here, right? Certainly before I came. Pastor's doing a service. He told me who it was. The family was. I can't remember who it is now. And the grandmother passed away. The mother passed away, and they're talking about how she was a believer. She's going to heaven. And then one of her sons stood up and said, "Blankety, blankety, blank. She is not going to blankety, blankety heaven." And then it got real intense. We had to take the guy out, and one of the brothers grabbed him by the back of the collar. He was a big dude. He was a big dude. And Beth's like, "Oh my gosh, I thought I was gonna get hit." But stuff like that happens. So that's where we gotta go. If you do that, So if I go to a service, if I do a funeral home, they say, "Okay, I have to know who's going to speak."
Right.
Right.
And then whoever. Now there's always one person that's to contact. It could be the family, the spouse, the children, whoever my contact. Okay, you tell me because we sit down and talk. Okay, this is what's going to be in the service. I give them an outline. What we're going to do, and then last minute you can change it. I'm fine with that, but you got to tell me exactly who's going to do what. And I've had it. I did a service not too long ago, just recently, where they said, "Oh, we're going to have so and so read these scriptures." Okay, cool. They said any particular ones. Yeah, I'm going to do this one, this one, this one. Okay, cool. And a song, cool. So I planned out like 15 minutes of scripture reading and a song by the family. Totally dropped it. I go, "Oh, okay, well," and I had the scripture, so I just read them, but that was fine. But I've had people go up and start to speak, and I tell them, if you're going to share, write it out,
Right.
keep it about 500 words. Because you'll go off cuff, but that time-wise, that'll keep it. But write it out. They'll get up there and they can't talk. I'll walk up and read it.
Yeah.
So those type of things is kind of
We
helpful.
were at a funeral too, where the guy that was doing the music, his cell phone went off twice.
Yeah, that's a frustration. I always, if I'm at a funeral home, or if we'll have someone announce, or I'll have a funeral director announce, turn off your cell phones.
Leave it home, leave it
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah, don't bring it in here. Yeah, we'll do that all
This
day.
guy's on the platform doing the music with his cell phone.
Yeah, that's not cool.
It's really cold out there. Okay.
All right. No one moves on from grief. They do move forward. That's a big part. It doesn't end. It just move forward with it. You never get over it. You can avoid grief. It's a kind of funny thing. Why I like the processes of a funeral, memorial services, going to graveside, doing those things, doing memory things such as, like big days, holidays, anniversaries, birthdays, especially the first two are very, very hard. Do things recognized as life are good. Like some people at Christian, they'll put a place in there for that person because that's for the dinner table. They'll do ornaments for that person that remember. Whatever, that's all good. Nothing wrong with that. It's all good.
My dad chewed tobacco.
Mm-hmm.
So when he died, he couldn't chew near the end because he kept swallowing
Right.
and making him sick.
Mhm.
So I went and bought a thing and Skoll wintergreen lawn cut and stuck it in his shirt. At this funeral, my mom was so upset that I did that. I was thinking, what the heck?
It's his way of thinking.
Yeah.
So you can't avoid it. Some people try to avoid it. You can't. You will go through it one way or the other. Grief always wins. You will go through it one way or the other, and if you avoid it too much, it's that depression side that will hit you. And I've run across people that don't go through grief well will get hit with it. And there's complicated grief. There's some grief that because of circumstances. For example, suicide.
Yes.
That's a hard one.
Yeah.
My
That's a real-
cousin was murdered.
Yep, murder.
When I
That's another
was,
one.
we were 3 months difference in our age. We buried him on Friday the 13th, 3 days before he was 19.
Wow.
Had a wife he spent 10 days with.
Phew.
And the guy OD'd on acid. He was at Fort Riley, Kansas.
Wow.
And I
Those are
came
hard.
home and locked myself in my room for 3 weeks.
Yep.
And finding my dad, it was spring break of my freshman year of college. Dad came in and said, okay, if you don't wanna go back to college, fine, but you can't just lay around here. You're going to work next Monday, you'd be down here, da-da-da-da-da, meet this guy, he's the superintendent. And it turned out that was the best thing for me.
Yep.
Cause
So
it
it's-
got me
Mm-hmm.
back in gear. And
Yeah, you get how to step out of it. You go.
I kinda went off the rails that summer, just,
Right.
but, that really was a wake-up call that I
Right.
couldn't just lay in bed the rest of
Yeah,
my
because that is now grief and loss, and that's a form of depression. People, people go up and down. Anxiety is high, depression is low, and we can't stay very high typically, and we'll come down. And then some people you can go so low, but you won't stay low. You'll come back up. So now I know this clinically. Okay, there's some people that they go up and they keep on going up. That's a panic attack, and that can be very dangerous. They'll come down eventually, hopefully. If not, they'll come down. They'll crash and they'll become depressive. Depression goes. You can go down depressive. Most people they'll come out of it, but longer than 3 to 5 days. Longer than 5 days, 3 weeks, we got a problem. We got to do something different. That's too much.
Well, it really, I went through everything fine, but when we were at the cemetery, they played taps,
Yep.
he was in the army,
Mm-hmm.
that's when it
Right.
just hit me.
Right.
And my uncle and another guy had to get under my elbows, I couldn't walk.
Right.
Take me to
It's,
the
it's,
doctor, I couldn't-
paralyzing. Yep. Big process. A lot of process.
I mean, neither one of us had brothers.
Right. So you're
We lived one house apart for 10 years.
real close, like a brother, if not a brother. Then it was probably the first death you experienced as a young man, let alone someone of a peer.
Yeah, at that there was, I can remember as a little kid, a gentleman from the church had passed away, and my mom took me to the funeral home, and she let me touch him.
Mm-hmm.
And, death was never
Right.
a
Right.
secret for us.
Right.
When my grandmother passed away, I was very close to her a few
Mhm.
years before, but, for someone that age to go in the way he went,
Mm-hmm.
it was just crazy.
Yep. Yep. Okay. You can never set a time frame on it. Again, how long is too long? It's just what it is. You can't. It just doesn't work that way. And you'll frustrate people when you try to say, well, you're going too long with this, because there's something that's going on now. How it affects them and so forth. If they're going through major depression, then we got to address that. That's separate though. But if they remember that person, they feel that the effect of that person's loss at holidays, birthdays, key events. That's what it is. There's no way around it. I said when I mentioned before, a lot of couples, when it comes to burying a child, they don't. When a child dies on you, it can ruin their marriage because each person grieves differently and different ways, and the parents are going through grief different ways. They're not on the same page. They can't help each other like they would normally would, and it just causes more drift, and then causes problems, and they can often lead to divorce.
I think illness can.
Yep.
That's basically my ex-wife for 7 months of all of that.
Yep.
And then her parents got involved, and it just got really ugly.
Yep.
And she moved in with mom and dad, and that was it.
Yep. And so this, all those things, unique things happen with death and family. That's why it's good to have like I said, I asked my parents, "How do you guys want to be? What do you guys want to be? We want to be cremated." Okay, point blank. They didn't have no hold barred. We want to be cremated. Okay. To my brother, you want to be cremated? Okay. But then
So they had talked about it.
yeah, they talked about it. They didn't tell us though. So I said, "What do you guys want to do?" And they told me, and they go, "Okay." And then right and all these events happened. Like they put me in charge. Like I have my house, my name's on the deed, my name's on all the accounts. And I go, well, I can knock you guys off. I got some property and some money. We're good. Oh, it's on video. Okay.
Michelle, she's on all of her parents' stuff.
And so, but I talked to my brother. I go, hey, mom and dad put me on the deed in the house. It's what they want to do. He's like, okay. So he and I communicate about all that stuff because I've seen some stuff go really wrong with that stuff, and family go, well, I didn't know, so he and I communicate about once a year. I'll do a message to him. Okay, this is mom and dad's finances. I'm showing their checking account. This is what's going on. This is their income right now. This is their big expenses. This is what's working. And he's like, okay, cool. And because I'll ask my mom, okay, mom, we got to do the financial stuff. Okay, and she pulls out a checking account, and we walk through it. Okay, what's going on? What's your cost for this? What's your cost for that? I'm surprised. I was surprised how much. Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah.
We had a suicide in our family, and it creates a lot of guilt.
And a lot of guilt. What ifs?
Any thing to say about how you deal with people with
It's-
that type of guilt?
It's the what ifs. What if we could have done? Could we have done? Should we have done? All that. You know that a person has a choice and that they use that volition and they make that choice for themselves. Now, ultimately, does God forgive them or not forgive them?
You never know what people do at the last moment.
You never. Well, this is where I side with it, because what if it's is it a now? Okay, now, did you attend? You attended Bethesda, right?
Mhm.
Do you know Marilee Trombley?
And Jim, I mean, your husband, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
She's my boss at where I practice, where I'm
Oh,
a
is that
counseling.
right?
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
okay.
she knew people that I knew
Yeah.
from Bethesda, and so I didn't. I didn't interview. She said, "You're hired. You're on staff here as a therapist." So I do Thursday nights, Fridays, Monday nights, Thursday nights, and Fridays, and I use her office. So she does a lot of work in this stuff. And so it goes back to the idea of a believer suicide. Okay, let's talk about that. Now, this is a very clinical idea. Someone in a suicide mindset is not in a normal mindset.
Right.
No one wakes up logically says, let me put a gun to my head and blow my brains out. No one does that logically. They're often in a psychological state and mode that is very, 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 very intense. It doesn't happen quickly. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens that day. The mood will hit. They will get out of control. They'll have the means to do so, and oftentimes, now sometimes there are some of those where they plan it out and they wait for the right opportunity, and no one knows it's going to come. Okay. So, give an example of this. So, I'm trained on how to deal with suicide. Okay. So, what'll happen? Someone will be saying suicide ideation. They'll have a plan. They'll have the means. And then, if that happens, someone says to me, "I want to kill myself." Okay. Do you have a plan to do that? No, I just feel like that way. That's kind of actually minor, really, relatively. It's concerning. We got to pay attention to it. But I'm not calling the police yet. If I call the police, then guess what? They won't do anything. Okay. Okay. I'm going to kill myself when I have a gun. I got bullets, and I can do it today. Okay, give me the gun. And I got to plan how. And so there's a means and a plan. You got to look for those three things. Then I got to take action. Okay. When they're in that state, though, they're very highly depressive or anxiety. They're on the two extremes typically. Okay. And they're very heightened. They're not of a natural mind. So when you say, well, a believer did that, and I've had believers commit suicide that I know personally, does God judgment? Because that's murder of the self. That's against the Ten Commandments. But were they of the right mind? And typically not. Because what I know is true is this. The one thing that we do when working with people in suicide, one, we come across them in suicide, okay, let's talk about that. They're in this heightened emotion or low emotion that will settle after a certain amount of time. It could take a few hours, but they'll come down and they'll be okay. Really difficult, really challenging, but you can walk through that. What happens though is that when someone actually does it, they go through the states no one was around.
Right.
And they got the means. Oftentimes they'll have it in the back of the head. They won't tell the person the plan. They know if they tell the plan, then the police come and they go off and they're in a 72-hour lockup at the hospital. Okay, they don't want to do that, so they go, I don't do that, so I'll plan it out some other way because that's where they're constantly depressive all the time. But they are not of a sound mind. So if they are a Christian and they profess Christ, they love Jesus and they serve Him all, and then that happens. I kind of say I go by grace and decide, well, God doesn't judge them by what they're doing, this heightened sense of mind, but what they were before. And I think I expect to see them in heaven. Because God's the ultimate judge, but I don't think He would judge them against that, because it wasn't this hard thing of a volatile choice when they're of sound mind. They weren't of sound mind.
My nephew was bipolar.
Right.
And he attempted suicide by trying to and didn't succeed.
Right.
So he was they put him on a lot of medications, and then they took him off meds, and the doctor was concerned because he said they self-medicate.
Mm-hmm.
So he did the huffing thing.
And that killed him.
Yeah, we couldn't find him, and when the state police actually found him, and he was in my parents' garage in his old car.
Right.
And he duct taped the bag around his head, and then used that aerosol that they used to.
Right.
And, it was,
Talk about guilt.
yeah, and everybody, my mom just,
Yeah.
because they lived at my parents' house for 17 years.
Right.
And it was just,
That's tough.
but he was bipolar. And, he had these manic moments.
Yep.
And if
Manic.
he would do what he wouldn't, the doctors say you need to get out in the sunlight, you need to get on the schedule. But he'd stay up all night and sleep all day and
Yep.
did everything wrong. And then they changed his meds up and took some away. And there were signs leading up to it that I saw, but I didn't know.
Right.
And my sister just is really, I don't know how you go through that.
It's really tough. Bipolar is one of the worst case scenarios and the highest risk of suicide and successful suicide.
It's what?
Successful suicide is with
Right.
bipolar disorders. There's type 1 and type 2. Type 2 is less, type 1 is more success. Attempts and actually accomplishments. When they do it. Although there's other issues that they'll attempt a lot, but they won't be successful in it. Managing medication for bipolar is probably the biggest challenge. It is the absolute biggest challenge to help them maintain the medication.
Because they think that they're better. So then
They feel better, plus the medication has a lot of harsh side effects. So, and that was true probably 10 years ago. The side effects were really rough. And it'd be like, man, I'm doing this stuff, but I feel like a zombie. And is this worth it? And so medication management has to be done well. It has to be constantly evaluated. It has to be evaluated like almost monthly or twice, at least quarterly. Most don't do it that way though. And so it's a big thing to deal with. But that's not uncommon. It's a real risk with bipolar is that it goes on for people feel good or whatever, or they don't like the side effects. I mean, some of those medications could be worse than they may for a short term help you, but then the long term, man, I hate this. Or they like the manic. Manic is very productive. Manic is fun. Don't think manic is horrible. Manic is now depression side. That's horrible. That's the darkest of darks. But the manic side is fun. You produce a lot. You do a lot of stuff. That's cool.
Yeah.
It's a high, literally.
Adrenaline's going.
Exactly. But so to lose that's been part of their life for a long time. They feel a loss of that, and so that has a big effect on it. So bipolar is a unique thing. Constant medication management and constant therapy. Honestly.
Well, and it's weird because all through high school and everything, he was everything normal.
Yeah. Usually it
You don't
happens.
really know what set
It's
it
adult
off.
onset. It's just something that's there and it just tricks and goes.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of evidence of chemical. How your monitors that stuff within your mind and your brain gets off whack and goes to these extremes and causes. And so it's a medical. Really, is a medical. It's like your blood pressure being up.
There's
They're all
no
in a
way.
big way.
I mean, and they put it down as self-inflicted, but I don't think he was doing it to commit suicide. I think he was.
He's doing too high, but it's such risk. That's the thing with addiction issues.
Yeah, that's what
you go back to it
I'm
and it's just risky. So there's different ways to approach it. One, understand there's no logic to it because the person wasn't thinking logically. We tend to it's totally emotion driven. Totally emotion driven. That pushes a lot of stuff. Okay. We gotta go in here. We're a lot of time. Okay, so this next piece, I actually grabbed this. Now you all know Cindy Zaglowski, our worship leader.
Yeah.
Okay, she has two daughters. You know Kaylin, who leads worship all the time. She has another daughter, Jessie Hall. She's married. She attends Freedom Christian. She does hospice care work a lot. She put this on just yesterday. She put it on Facebook, and I go, "This is really good." It says people tend to believe that grief shrinks over time. So it's the jar and it gets smaller. That's not true. What really happens is we go around grief. Grief doesn't shrink;
jar
it
gets
stays.
bigger.
The jar gets bigger. That's a better way to think of it than it stops, it ends, it closes. It's a chapter that moves on. We continue. No, it's stays present. We just change. I drew it this way. If you think about your life, that's how I viewed it. If you think about your life, I got a statement, and you have each person in your life is one of these circles.
Right.
Let's say your parents are these circles, mom and dad. They're more at the core center. You have a spouse that comes later, but bigger. You may have children, and your life encompasses them. Once a person passes away, that space in you and your life doesn't stop. It stays constant. You continue to grow around it. And there's different ones. There'll be some that affect you certain ways, some that don't affect you certain ways. If you have a friend when you're in your teen years and they pass away, and like a friend, okay, well that was close, that was hard, but it wasn't life altering like it was like a parent or spouse or child. So it's the level, the weight of that person's relationship to you and how they kind of fill that gaps in your life that creates you. Okay? So it doesn't like go away, it stays there. The memory, who
So
that
it's
person
constant.
is to you, stays. You just continue to go around it. Okay? So the children, parents, we expect them to, especially parents, when they get older, we expect them to pass away. It's just life.
That's what my mom says, my bags are packed, I'm ready to go.
Yep. We expect that. But children, no. So it has a different effect. But the space that they have still stays there. Okay, and that one way to frame it up. Nursing during times of grief. Okay, so when you do go to the funeral home, say what you do say is, "I'm sorry for your loss. I'm praying for you." You don't say, you don't say,
Hey, how you doing?
you know. You can ask, "How are you?" and they go, "Oh, do you really know?" I go, "Yeah, I want to know." And they go, "Oh, okay, I'll tell you." What you do not say is, "Your loss is heaven's gain." They don't give a flying rip about that. Okay. Be authentic. If you can share a true statement about the loved one that is lost, that's good to share those things. Remember, what they meant to you is good. It gives aspect to their life. If you don't have anything, don't make one up. If you don't know the person, I go to a lot of funerals. I mean, I know the person. I'm going there for the people,
Right.
and I go, and I just want to hear the story. I don't make anything up. I've seen people do that, and it's like the most dumbest thing because they feel awkward. They feel like they have to say something. You don't say anything. Be careful in comparing your loss to their loss. You can say, I lost my husband, I lost my parent, and this was so hard, and I can understand to some aspect of what you feel, but it's different for everyone, and that's okay. But you can't say, oh yeah, when I lost my dog, that mentioned when they lost their parents. Don't do that. Because when you share equal relationship, that helps normalize the feeling that they have. And you say, oh yeah, it's hard for me, it was difficult, and I didn't know getting through. At the funeral, it's a blur. No one sleeps really good. No one eats really right. It's just they're going through it. But how they walk through it afterwards is a big part. No, people say very dumb things at funerals and during time of loss. And say, I remember one time I walked to someone and go, "I'm sorry for all the stupid things people are going to tell you."
Yeah.
and they laughed. I go, "I heard a few." I go, "Yep, just ignore them. Just move on. It's okay. God loves them all the same. It's all right."
It's a good thing he does, because
Yep.
some of them make it hard for the rest of us.
And you don't have to say anything. There's power just going, showing up, shaking a hand, giving a hug, being present. That's a powerful thing in itself. And it's a very good thing to do.
I remember a pastor saying one time, if you don't have anything that you could share with them, just say God bless you.
God bless you. Exactly. It's not a big thing. We're going to visitation for funeral. Always sign the book and address so they can remember. It helps them a lot. Those books they put out, they're there for a reason. They want to know that you were there because they can't keep track of everybody who comes through. And they may not have your address. They want to send a
like when
card.
they have all the pictures out, too.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't put the address, I just put the name.
But
Just so then they at least know I showed.
it's good that they don't show, but I understand. Sending those cards is actually part of the grief process.
Oh, I never thought of that.
And it's funny. I'll get because I always do the card. I always put the thing on it, and I'll get cards way later. And then I go, hey, I got your card. Thank you for sending that. And they go, it took me so long to do that. I go, because it was hard to write those. I go, yeah, because every person was a memory. Every person was part of the story, and that's okay. And to write that out is a very big part of the family's process, and that's okay. So that's why the address is helpful. To be aware of the demands of the family. Don't if they're like if you feel like people are asking them to move everywhere, do this and that, you gotta say, well, if I can help them ease their hecticness, then do
Always
so.
sure don't make a big decision for a year.
Yeah,
Wait
yeah.
at least 1 year to make any big
Don't be quick about anything. Don't sell the house right away. Don't pack up the clothes right away. Don't, my friend he's a pastor in Howell. His wife died away a little over a year and a half ago now, of cancer. It'll be 2 years next month. Wow. And because she had cancer for a long time, and he called me like 2 months ahead. Call me up because you're doing the funeral. I go, I am. Yep, you're doing the funeral. Okay, I'm doing the funeral. And but so when we arrived there, get to the church for the funeral. Big funeral because it's my pastor's wife, and we're walking through, and he goes, okay, I got a box for you. I go, a box? No, because it's for Rosemary. There's a bunch of stuff for her of Diane's that Diane wanted Rosemary to have. And I go, and she's like, oh my gosh. She goes, yeah, we've got everything packed up. The clothes are packed up. That's how she wanted to do it. How the kids wanted to do it. We did a whole. I go, wait a minute, buddy. Are you? He goes, no. This is how we walked through this with her. What she wanted to do and how she wanted it done. I go, so that helped you? He goes, yeah. I'd be like an idiot. I go, well, that's true. So there's process, but then if it's sudden, not planned, and the person didn't speak into, they're going to be at a like, what do we do? How do we do this? Well, and then so they got to give time and place. Sometimes it's the biggest leap for a lot of folks. Okay, we need to pack this up and put this away. But then you got to navigate. You need to put some things away that's needed, but there's some things that you don't have to.
Right.
And
Was that the Assembly of God Church on M59 right there?
Yes, Sunrise Assembly. Jeff Black.
I grew up in Howell.
Okay, yep. He's been there for like 20 years.
Good things about that
Yeah,
church.
Jeff just been there for about 20 years, so he's been there for a while. If invited to luncheon or Grayside, always go to the Grayside luncheon when possible. It's just good to go and be present. It just means something to the family. Say you're saving money. No, they're spending a lot of money as it is. If you invite you, then they don't want you. If they can't afford you, they won't invite you. Trust me. But if you get invited, they can afford it. If they don't have all the money, they got to feed the people. They commit to a price anyways, and they get stuck. So, follow-up lay ministers may be called upon to provide special care of those going through grief and loss after. So, calling visitations you may for like weekly you show up, you call them like once a week for 4 to 6 weeks, then monthly for 3 to 6 months after that. Check on the person, talk and pray with them, and let us know that because what we do is oftentimes we may assign someone. Okay, can you follow up with them and say kind of be their care person for the next 6 months, and you let us know what's going on with them and so
What's going on
forth.
with the family of the policeman that died? Did they get that all squared away? Because I heard there were some issues there with him. They didn't want to pay him because he was on the job or not.
I have no idea. I don't know anything about any of that. That's kind of outside of our thing. Remember, the goal is to represent Christ's love in a tangible way. Be present by being present with persons as they go through the grief, no matter how deep or how long it takes, because there's no end time to it. And that's the big part of that. And we will stop with that. Okay? And we are way past overtime. I don't know. That's all it was getting. We will stop there for now. And I will see you guys the next time we meet, which will be the final session. We'll do 2 more lessons basically, and wrap it up.
Just real quick, we were talking with, what is his name again? Steve Addy,
Yes,
and they're gonna start that new,
Visitation.
that's a blessing time. It's like shut. It's kind of what I was telling the laymen to do for shutting here. So they're doing their thing, and I'm going to try to get.
but he's saying that we're gonna be able to give out communion.
That's a new thing that the pastor just decided we're going to do. So we're going to be setting that up, and I'll go over through what's got to be done. Like I give
Yeah, because I thought.
Okay. Yeah, when he said that, I thought, okay, well, we were told that we were.
that pastor changed that. He changed it. He goes, "We're going to say." I go, "Okay, we'll let elders." He goes, "We'll let elders and lay ministers in shut-in care
Okay.
do communion, but I'll cover what to do with that next session because that just came up this week." I go, "We're going to do it." He goes, "I've been thinking about it." I go, "Okay, well, I got a lesson for lay ministers. I got to figure out what we're going to do with that, so I got to finish it up." So,
When's our next?
I'm looking at it right now.
It's the 1st of April.